So we've looked at several find methods, which are essentially methods that read data. Now we're going to look at a create method, a kind of method that writes data. We need create methods in our application so that we can write data to our database during transactions. In particular, the simple Affable Bean project initiates a transaction when a user has successfully filled out their customer information on the checkout page and clicks the Submit Purchase button. If the transaction is successful, a new customer is added to the customer table of the database. A new order is added to the customer order table of the database. And the products purchased, along with their quantities, are added to the customer order line item table in the database. Before we look at a specific create method, let's look at an example transaction in the simple Affable Bean project. Here's the checkout page from the simple Affable Bean project. The user, Mozart, has purchased a number of products totaling €8.52. He has filled out the form with his name, email, phone number, address, the region in Prague where he lives, and his credit card number. Once the information has been filled out, Mozart clicks the Submit Purchase button. If everything goes well, he's taken to the confirmation page. He's given a confirmation number, and his order information is displayed. From this page, we can see that Mozart purchased 1 piece of cheese, 1 package of sausages, and 2 pieces of broccoli. If we go to the administrative console, we will see both the customers and the orders that have been added to the database. From this, we can see that Mozart's customer information has been added to the database, and that he has a customer ID of 3. If you look at the previous slide, you'll also see that the order information associated with Mozart's purchase is in fact the order with the order ID of 3. Let's look at what happens to the database when Mozart's order is processed. In this scenario, we've only had 2 customers and 2 orders so far. The information that will go into the database during the transaction for Mozart's purchase comes not only from the form that Mozart filled out on the checkout page, but also from the shopping cart object for Mozart's session, which contains the products and the quantities he purchased. When Mozart hits the Submit Purchase button, this information is sent to a method called Place Order in a Customer Order Service object. We're going to look at this method in detail later. For now, it's important to know that the Place Order method calls 3 different create methods. First, it calls the create method in the customer DAO. The create method effectively reserves a row in the customer table of the database. The data will not be committed to the database unless there are no errors during the course of the transaction. This assures that either all the data will be committed to the database or none of it will. The customer table in the database for the simple Affable Bean project automatically generates a primary key. This is important because we need the primary key for the customer in order to create the customer order. And that's because the customer ID is a foreign key in the customer order table. So the create method for customer returns the primary key generated by the database, which in this case is 3. But the data hasn't been committed yet. If an error occurs and the data is not committed, the next primary key generated by the database will be 4. Once the customer's create method has completed, the place order method calls the customer order create method. The create method for customer order requires the customer ID. The database automatically generates a key for the customer order also. And the customer order ID is required for the create method of customer order line item. So again, the primary key is generated and returned by the create method. Once you have the primary key for the customer order, you can iterate through the shopping cart items and call the create method of the customer order line item DAO for each product. Notice that the database does not automatically generate a primary key for the line item table. The line item table is an intermediate table in the many-to-many relationship between the product and the customer order tables. The effective primary key is simply the combination of the customer order ID and the product ID. Since there is no distinct or separate primary key, the line item create method cannot return one. Therefore, the line item create method is a void method.